Human beings are wired for connection. As babies, we're born into a profound state of dependence on our caregivers for all of our needs, including help to regulate our emotions because we're incapable of managing them on our own. We depend on co-regulation with our caregivers, which means we can be soothed through signals like caring touch and eye contact and tone of voice and facial expressions. And in this way, the infant's nervous system synchronizes to the state of the caregiver's nervous system. And although later in life we may develop skills in self-regulation, so we can manage our emotions through exercise or meditation, breathing, self-talk, or other tools, we're still fundamentally social beings, and we need close and caring connection from the cradle to the grave. Human beings have historically survived through close tribal connections. Tribal cooperation allowed us to defend against threats and collect resources to survive and to take care of one another in times of need. So for these reasons, humans evolved highly social brains that are deeply tuned into the positive and the negative social signals that we receive from others, and we need secure connections with others where we feel valued, where we feel understood, where we feel cared about, if we want to feel whole and if we want to truly thrive. Attachment theory describes this fundamental need to connect with others and the ways that it manifests in child-parent relationships and in adult romantic relationships. Attachment theory proposes that the core human drive is not for sex or reproduction or to find food, but rather to connect with others for safety and nervous system regulation. And this proposal is increasingly supported by modern neuroscience. Attachment theory was first developed in the 1950s by John Bowlby and has continued to evolve and to become one of the most empirically validated psychological theories. So what are the core human needs that we meet through connection to others? Research suggests there are 5 core attachment needs, and that these are especially vital in our dependent years as infants, but continue to be important throughout our whole lives. So first, we need people in our lives we can turn to who are safe and who are available for us. We need people in our lives who we can trust and be comfortable turning to towards connection, especially in times of need. Second, we need people who are attuned to our emotional experiences. We need to feel understood and seen in our authentic emotional experience. We need people who can pick up our cues, emotional cues, and be there for us in an empathetic way that allows us to feel understood and accepted as we are. We need to feel seen in the eye of another. We need to feel felt by another for who we really are and for our true emotional experience. Third, we need connections that can soothe us. Soothing is the process of nervous system co-regulation, and it happens through touch and tone of voice that's gentle and warm, engaged facial expression, words of reassurance that reassure us that another person is really there for us. And fourth, we need connections with others who express delight and appreciation for who we are and for our efforts in the world. We need to feel loved and valued for being just as we are. And when we have parents that can unconditionally show a child that their very being brings the parents delight without any condition or performance, then the child internalizes a positive sense of self, and that leads to confidence and self-esteem later in life. And without that positive regard from the parents, that delight, a child can tend to develop a sense of shame and inadequacy about who they are. And finally, we need people in our lives who support us in pursuing our best self. So we need to be supported to go after the things that bring us meaning and joy, and to be celebrated for listening to our inner guidance and bringing our unique and authentic self into the world. So those are the 5 core attachment needs we need for healthy psychological development early in our life. And we continue to need them to feel belonging with others and to feel wholeness in ourselves throughout our entire lives. Based on our experiences of having these needs met or not met in our early life, attachment theory proposes that there are 4 basic attachment styles. These styles describe our needs, patterns, and expectations in connection to others, especially in romantic relationships in adulthood. And these attachment styles are largely determined by early life experiences with caregivers, but they can also be shaped by significant relationship experiences we have later in life, and they may also have a genetic component. So the 4 attachment styles are secure, avoidant, anxious, and disorganized. And that last one is also known sometimes as anxious avoidant attachment. So first, people with the secure attachment style are comfortable with intimacy, and they also have generally a sense of security in themselves. They tend to believe that they're worthy and that their physical and emotional needs are reasonable to expect to be met with the help of others, and that others are going to want to help them meet those needs. And they believe they're worthy of having their needs met because they had the experience of having their needs met much of the time when they were young. Secure individuals tend to enjoy emotional closeness, but also have a sense of independence and can maintain a strong sense of self and identity outside of a relationship. They generally don't overly fear abandonment or being overwhelmed by the emotional needs of others. They're generally more confident than people with other attachment styles. They're able to regulate their emotions well, and they can form bonds with other people without much difficulty. And research has shown that roughly 50% of people have a secure attachment style. Those with the anxious attachment style generally had caregivers who were inconsistently available to meet the child's needs. This could be because one or both parents were emotionally unavailable, because the parents were very busy with work, or raising multiple children, or due to mental illness or other circumstances. Having their needs met inconsistently creates relationship anxiety. So people with anxious attachment style tend to fear that they're going to be abandoned, and they're often hypervigilant to the emotional cues of others. And this helps them better anticipate whether or not their needs are going to be met or whether there's a possible threat in the relationship. People with the anxious attachment style often have a desire to merge with a partner and to develop really intense emotional closeness, and that can help them feel more secure in themselves and safe in the connection. They also tend to be preoccupied by their relationships. So they might think obsessively about a romantic relationship and analyze every small detail to try to understand what is happening, and that's especially true if there's some uncertainty in the connection. So this could happen when a new relationship is developing and the connection isn't totally certain or secure, or when there is some kind of discord in a longer-term relationship. People with anxious attachment style tend to feel a good deal of core shame in themselves, which is a natural response for children who don't consistently have their needs met. And it's because they assume that maybe there's something wrong with them, and that's why their parents aren't meeting their needs. So people with this attachment style often need a lot of reassurance and a lot of consistency of emotional availability in romantic connections, because it's hard to feel fully secure or trusting for them. They tend to have very big feelings, and when the connection feels threatened in some way, whether that's the objective reality or not, their natural response is to ratchet up their emotions to protest the sense of threat to the connection. So this may lead them to reach out many times to a partner for reassurance, or to pursue connection even when another person is pulling away, and to often express emotions in unregulated ways that can inadvertently push others away. So the evolutionary strategy behind anxious attachment is to preserve connections that are important to survival by holding on tightly to them, by obsessing about the connection, by seeking reassurance, and by acting out protest behaviors and heightening their emotions when there's a threat to the relationship or it feels like there's a threat. And feeling and acting this way is generally not a conscious choice. Rather, a person who's doing it feels compelled to act out these attachment behaviors based on their early life experiences. There's a substantial subconscious component. And research has shown that roughly 20 to 25% of people have an anxious attachment style. The third attachment style is known as avoidant attachment. And so people with this attachment style, they either had caregivers who were consistently unavailable or who were extremely emotionally unpredictable, chaotic, or intrusive. And in response, from a very early age, people with this style will learn to unconsciously suppress their emotions and their needs for connection with other people. This is a survival mechanism to cope with an environment in which having emotional needs or attachment needs that went chronically unmet, it would be too painful to sustain those needs. So they learn to shut them down instead. And as a result, people with this attachment style learn to adopt a lone wolf approach to life. They tend to develop intense self-reliance, and they may look down upon the emotions of others or the needs that other people have for connection as too needy or out of control or too much. People with avoidant attachment are often highly logical, maybe overly logical, and discount emotions. And when they do experience some kind of uncomfortable emotion like stress or frustration or disappointment, they tend to rely on self-regulation through solitary activities like exercise or work or video games or drugs, rather than to reach out for others for connection and support. People with avoidant attachment often think quite highly of themselves. They can appear quite confident and may be quite successful in the world. However, they're uncomfortable with emotional intimacy, and it's a challenge for them to be there for others' emotions because they're not that much in touch with their own emotions. So it can be difficult for them to empathize or to relate to other people, and they're quick to turn to intellectual problem solving to try to fix emotional issues. People with this attachment style are afraid of having their autonomy and independence compromised by other people needing too much from them, and they tend to try to keep others at an arm's length. They sometimes struggle to be aware of their emotions and may experience depression because they lack deep interpersonal connections and the sort of resonant emotional experiences that bring a sense of vibrancy and meaning to life. And roughly 20 to 25% of people have that avoidant attachment style. As you can imagine, when a person with a more anxious attachment style and an avoidant attachment style get together, it's often a recipe for chaos. And this is a coupling that happens often because an avoidant and an anxious partner often recreate familiar family dynamics from the other one's childhood, which creates an unconscious draw to the other. So one partner desperately seeks connection while the other is determined to maintain their independence. And the harder the anxious one pushes and protests, the more the avoidant one will become distant. And this can create absolute relationship misery, though in some cases, couples therapy can help bridge the gap of connection between them and create more emotional safety that feels good for both partners. The fourth attachment style is known as disorganized attachment, or anxious avoidant attachment is another term for it. And that's because it captures key features of both the anxious and the avoidant attachment style. So people with this disorganized style often had caregivers who were scary or they were abusive. And it's such a bind because as kids, they were totally dependent on their caregiver and also scared of them. And this creates a very confusing experience for a child. They might experience urges to escape and to protect themselves against their parent, while also feeling urges to connect with the parent for safety and care. People with disorganized attachment often want closeness with others, but are afraid of it at the same time. They tend to have a lot of shame. They may have a real difficulty trusting other people, and for good reason, given how scary and untrustworthy the attachment figures in their upbringing were. So to cope with their childhoods, people with disorganized attachment often learn to dissociate from their experience and escape into fantasy. This can lead to the development of really impressive artistic and creative abilities. However, they often have compulsions to escape their present moment reality well into adulthood through a continued reliance on dissociation. It could be drugs or other forms of escapism. People with disorganized attachment are often distrusting even of safe relationships and may feel more drawn to abusive or otherwise uncaring relationships that recreate the familiar but destructive dynamics of their childhood. Our brains are just drawn to what's familiar and to our early impressions of what love is and what love feels like, even if that perpetuates pain and trauma. Roughly 5% of individuals have a disorganized attachment style. It's also important to know that attachment styles can be context dependent. So, for example, in some relationships, someone might demonstrate more signs of secure attachment, and then in another relationship, they might have more of a anxious attachment experience, depending on the dynamics in the relationship. Additionally, a person may at times switch between two different attachment styles based on experiences with different caregivers. For example, someone may have had a more secure relationship with one parent and a more avoidant or disorganized experience with another parent, and that can both of those can show up in adulthood in different situations. All that being said, research has shown that our primary attachment styles are often apparent by 18 months of age, so really young, and tend to remain consistent throughout the lifespan. However, through developing secure relationships in adulthood and in working on oneself in therapy or other paths of healing, it is possible to change your attachment style over time towards greater security. When people with one of the insecure attachment styles are able to cultivate secure attachment over time, it is known as becoming earned secure. And alternatively, if we have destructive or traumatic relationships in adulthood, it's also possible for our attachment styles to become less secure over time. It's empowering to understand attachment theory. It can help you make sense of your own experience and your experience of others in pretty revelatory ways. However, simply understanding your attachment patterns doesn't mean you can just decide to change them. Attachment behaviors and feelings are stored in deep parts of the limbic system and the right hemisphere of the brain that don't change through conscious choice or logic. Rather, change occurs by having new emotional experiences that gradually can update our models of relationship and connection stored deeply in the brain. Our internal working models of attachment were created through thousands and thousands of experiences over the decades of our upbringing. And so it takes time and repetition to clear out the old and build new models that can help you have more secure and healthy relationships. All right, that is it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I hope it was helpful. Please consider liking and subscribing if you want to learn about more content like this, and I will see you next time.